Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 827. I had the white pieces and started off with c4, the English opening. My opponent goes e6, which you can see is one of the respectable replies here. And I went g3. Knight c3 and g3 are the usual ways that I play it. d4, of course, would not be in English, but it's it's a kind of move order trick you can use to get a Queen's Gambit declined position, I guess. Knight to f3 I don't play so much, although that still would be English. But I like to keep my options open for this knight because it might go to e2, for example, in the Botvinnik setup. So that's why I usually go with knight c3 or g3 here. So g3, and now here d5 is the most common move, followed by knight to f6. Very respectable moves, staking out a presence in the center. My opponent played a move which is not in the book at all, c6. And although it doesn't seem to be any immediate way to exploit it, the chess engine thinks that I would have a pretty big advantage if I were to just play with d4 or with bishop to g2. Those seem to be the best for white. I played in kind of a routine fashion. I was just going with my normal setup. So this doesn't lead to any advantage to white, whereas those other moves, perhaps I can push for an advantage. Anyway, he goes d5 here. I went bishop to g2. And I was kind of wondering during the game and afterwards if there was any moment if he could have just grabbed this pawn here. It doesn't really work in this case. I wanted to show you how this works. It's kind of interesting. If he takes the pawn, I mean, it's not that this is particularly bad, but if he tries to hold on to it, he can get in trouble. So, for example, after queen a4, the chess engine says the best move is just to play e5 and let me take the pawn back. Kind of a funny play from black to play e6 and then e5. But anyway, I guess this is a decent position for black. The other way to handle this after queen a4 is not as good. And this is a nice trick to keep in mind. After b5 to hold on to the pawn, you can just take that pawn off. And of course you're relying on this pin on the diagonal, but you might think, well, why not just take that knight? It comes with a tempo on the queen. The queen can drop back, and there's still no way to save the rook in the corner. So black is going to lose the exchange. So yeah, there's just no way out of it. The pieces on the queen side are just not coordinated enough to block that diagonal. So kind of a funny point. There's another way to play this. You could even take the pawn, although this is a little trickier. But the queen can go into b7, and once again you're going to get that rook back in the long run. Yeah, that's a little more complicated, I think, and maybe not as good. I think the simplest and best move is just to drop the queen back to c2 and kind of pick up that rook at your leisure. There was one other idea here I was wondering about during the game, which was d4. And I mentioned I was going to play knight to cancel that, knight to e4 here. But knight to e4 is a blunder if you want to think about it. See if you can spot the idea here. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now. Yeah, if I play knight e4, that knight can be trapped. It has nowhere to go from that square. All these dark squares are covered, and all these dark squares are occupied, and that one is covered. So he can play f5, and that knight piece is just lost. And you might think there's some compensation for white. Black hasn't developed, and he's got some potential open lines here, but basically white is just a piece down. So after e5, I mean after d4, the knight has to go to a4. And this is okay. You might worry about this b5 move again, but once again you can rely on the pen to save you. So the knight will be safe over there for the time being, and eventually I guess you might play b3 to give the knight a way to retreat back into to a safe spot. Anyway, so this is okay so far from me, but black did not play any of those challenging moves. He just played knight to f6, which is also a fine move. We're staying in the range of about even. I played d4 to stop those possibilities of black playing d4. And now he goes bishop e7. Right here is a spot where he could actually take the pawn and try and hold on to it. But because I can't take back right away. Actually, the chess engine gives this line, knight f3, knight bd7, castles, and now b5. Holding on to the pawn like that, and e4 getting some compensation. And this kind of position is the sort of thing that might arise from the Catalan, or this position too. This is would be the open Catalan where black has decided to take, but this is a very typical position where white has compensation for the pawn, so it's an okay gambit. And in fact, black usually doesn't play this way because the pressure on the long diagonal is kind of annoying, and that's a weakness there. This knight on d7 is actually in a good spot to prevent this knight from hopping into e5. So it's probably playable for black as well. But yeah, mostly people go for the closed Catalan these days as black rather than the open Catalan, because those positions can be kind of tricky. Anyway, he didn't play any of that. He went with bishop to e7, and I decided to take here. So gotten rid of all of those possibilities. And now there's just some normal development. So let's just go forward to the next kind of interesting moment. Well, I thought it was kind of interesting he put his bishop on c6. It clamps down on my push of the e pawn, which is something I would like to do to kind of free up my position and get some activity going. Maybe other ideas would be to push the h or the f pawns forward. But I always kind of like to get a central push going if I can. And then in this position, he starts to maneuver his knight. I think that's a good idea. He's bringing the knight into c4, which looks like a good square. And I go for this kind of funny plan with rook b1. Yeah, the chess engine starts to like black a little better along here. So it stayed in the range of about even, but maybe with a slight preference to black. Black is certainly very solid, and this is a good outpost for the knight. And the chess engine is not even worried about me pushing the b pawn forward. So for example, a chess engine would play like this. It would kick the bishop. This pretty much forces the exchange. The bishop doesn't have many good squares to go to. May end up getting trapped over there even. So bishop takes, then I can play b5, and then it just dropped this bishop back to d7. Black has the bishop pair. I can open up some lines over on the queen side, but maybe I can't do a whole lot with it, and this is a pretty good knight here on c4, so it seems like black is doing fine. He went with b5, and I traded, and black is okay in these lines as well. In fact, but I noticed that he had taken the pressure off e4, and so I thought I would use this opportunity to grab that pawn. And I really did not plan to sack the pawn, but there is a line here, and so the chess engine thinks that's a mistake, and maybe it is because I didn't calculate this line out correctly. There is a line here where black can snag that pawn and keep it. Let's see, instead of e4, the chess engine is recommending rook e1. Yeah, this doesn't seem to lead to a whole lot. It's just kind of some maneuvering here. Rook c7, knight to f4, and the exchange of the bishop, queen to e2. And I don't think I even like this position particularly. I mean, there's some tricks here. So the queen and the knight are coordinating on the bishop, so if this knight moves away, the queen doesn't come under attack, or can meet the attack by knight takes bishop. But I don't know, this knight can attack the rook. The knight here is attacking this rook. It feels like it's a little bit strange, this position, kind of held together by tactical tricks. So I like the idea of e4, but it just doesn't work here if black plays correctly. So starts off okay, knight takes. I have to trade bishops here, and then he just took back immediately. The way that he can keep a pawn is by playing this kind of trail of destruction line, where he takes this knight here, hitting my queen, and so I have nothing better than to take, and he takes, and then I can move my bishop with a tempo on the rook. Usually there's enough to kind of get white out of trouble in these situations, but he has, the line continues here. He has knight a3 hitting my rook. I have rook to b3, and knight a3 not only hit my rook, but also hit my knight over here, which is loose. So my rook b3 hitting his knight. He can grab my knight. Let's see, I can take the rook. He can take the rook. Let's see, I can take back. He takes back. and then I take the knight and he attacks my b-pawn. And so he's emerged from this. We're in an endgame where black is a pawn up. The knight seems a little bit out of play, but it's actually doing a useful job. For one thing, it makes it difficult for me to defend the b-pawn. Like if I wanted to keep the pressure on the a-pawn and defend the b-pawn with rook to a4, this knight can come in here and attack my rook. So yeah, I think black is just a pawn up here. So that would be maybe best play. He keeps some kind of edge also in these lines, the way it was played in the game. He took back, I took off the knight, and got my pawn back this way. But I am left with this weak d-pawn, and he can pile up on it. The chess engine is recommending rook fd8 immediately, and then say rook e1 to unpin the knight, queen d6, just piling up on it, keeping my knight tied down. Maybe at some point he can trade the knight off and win the pawn. So that looks like a good line for black. He went knight d6, kicking my bishop, dropped back, and he went knight f5. And so knight f5 also seems to be okay for black, but maybe not the most accurate. So once again, rook f to d8 to pile up on that pawn, and knight to c4, hitting my queen if I try to defend it with queen d2. You know, I'm lifting up my queen so I can bring a rook over to defend that pawn. You can go queen d6 here and go rook f c1. Is the line given by the chess engine? I don't know. There's still probably some tricks here. Well, my queen is defending the knight here, so I guess this is I'm kind of holding on to things for the moment. The knight's defending the pawn, but black is better. Anyway, he went knight to f5, and I guess it's more or less even around this point. Let's see. I went rook to e1. I want to unpin that knight. He goes rook f to d8 now, pressurizing that rook. And I went with d. Oh, he went. What happened here? Yeah, I went with d5, and he played e takes. So this is a line that allows me to get a pretty decent position. He could have gone rook to c4. So I think this is interesting, and just keep the tension in the position. The thing is, this pawn is pinned here, so I'm not really threatening to take. Let's see, queen d2, once again trying to bring the rook over, g6, and rook b to d1. Seems to be a way for black to try and keep some activity and keep some tension in the position. Let's see, he exchanged, and now I have knight f4, so I kind of can liquidate my weakness in the center and come out of this okay. He went queen to a7. I grabbed the pawn, and he went to rook to d7. So up until this point, well, let's back up. Let's see, he could continue with bishop to c6, and the chess engine rates this as about even. And it looks like an even position. We have the same material balance and pretty much the same distribution of pawns. So rook d7 is a blunder that should lose the game. And I played queen g4, which is a good move. It gives me a significant edge. But there's an even stronger move here if you want to see if you can spot the best move for white. It's a good example of that saying, if you find a good move, look for a better one. Because there are loose pieces around and there's ways to exploit them. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now, so pause the video if you want time to think about it. The move here is queen to c2. It's a double attack, hitting the knight and hitting the rook, and rook takes queen is impossible because of the back rank. Rook to e8 is mate, and even moving the knight to defend the rook loses to queen takes. You sack the queen, and then after knight takes queen, you also have a mate. So there's well, the back rank can be defended, but the material is going to be lost. So queen c2 is the simplest win. Queen g4 is also winning, just not as strong, and I didn't find the best move here. So after knight h6, which was a decent move, you know, queen g4, I should mention, was threatening this fork because of the pin. I was forking the king and the rook. So, and also the knight was loose. So moving the knight here to attack my queen, a very logical response. And here I didn't play the best move. So if you want to spot the best move here, it's pretty simple. Okay, yeah, the answer here is knight e7 check. And I was worried about this because I thought my queen would be lost at the end. But after I take the rook, there is a back rank threat. And let's see, if you could play king f8 maybe. What do I do? Knight takes c8. Knight takes queen. Oh, my knight is hitting his queen. Yeah, anyway, these tactics go on and on. So so that was the best move, and that's the winning line. After knight f6 check, it's actually defendable. So he goes king h8. Let's see, I go queen g5, keeping the pressure on here. And he goes rook d2, and that loses because I can just take it. The way he can defend here, although it's pretty tricky, he can play rook to d4. There may be other defenses too. This is the first choice of the chess engine. I can play rook b to c1, threatening the back rank. But this time he can take, because when he takes here, it pins my rook. So let's see, I have to take. I can take with the rook, maintaining back rank threats. He can go queen e7. I come into the back rank, and he can block with the rook. So queen e7 supported rook d8. Then I can play queen e5, setting up more back rank threats. So if he takes the queen, I take the rook. So the queen drops back to f8. I take the rook, queen takes, and knight to d5. Get my knight out of trouble finally. And we see it's an even position where my pieces are a little more active. The chess engine gives the advantage to white, but not necessarily a winning advantage. So that would have been the best line from that position. Although you can see there were a lot of ways for both sides to go wrong still. Anyway, a very interesting and complicated finish to that game. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you again soon.